welcome to the Commander's Journey, a journey for new Commander players ready to uncover their hidden magic potential.
Welcome back. I'm your host, Joel.
And I'm Alex.
And today we got another top 10 for you. Zendikar Rising has dropped, and every time these sets come out, we're excited to just look at our favorite cards in the format. We each pick our top 5. We put them together. We usually pick a sleeper. I think this time around we're gonna talk about maybe a commander we're excited about because there's so many cool legendary creatures in this set as well. And to get it out of the way right at the top, right? We're not going to talk about Lithoform Engine. You should know about that.
Yeah, Lithoform, biggest card in the set, definitely the one that's going to be the most talked about. Instead of taking up one of our top 5 slots with Lithoform, because honestly, there's so many cards that I would want to talk about. Trying to take as many of them off the plate as possible is ideal, because I could do a top 10, top 15 here and still have plenty to talk about.
Yeah, there's so many cool cards here. I think we were chatting about this set earlier. I think a few weeks ago, and as everything was dropping, I wasn't so excited about it. I was a little under the weather too. I'm gonna give myself an excuse, but I wasn't super excited. I remember talking to you on the phone. You were like, "Why aren't you excited about how awesome this set is?" And then after I took a hard look at this, I am a new player, so it took me a while. But looking at all these cards, I am stoked. This set is insane. This set is really, really good.
This set, and they've been doing this a small ramp up as of the last, about 4 or 5 sets, but really this set in particular, especially with the fact that everything's also a land and a spell or as a different type of land. You can count that towards your 37 land count very easily in a commander deck. And, it's one of those, it'll do double dipping as long as you can pay for that tap land, and how have that hurt your deck too much. I can't see why you're not putting every effect in there that you can get away with pretty much. As long as the tap land doesn't hurt you too much, I put them all in. I'm serious. This box is going to hold value for a long time after the set because of these things that are also lands.
Exactly. A lot of cards we could slot in. So let's start off with our sleepers then. So why don't you go ahead and give us your sleeper for this set, Alex?
So my sleeper is a little interesting. Originally was going to be Feed the Swarm, which I think has gotten so much press. I was just looking up right before we were recording, and it's already almost a 50-cent common. And I'm like, yeah, that's not really a sleeper. Everyone knows how great Feed the Swarm is for mono black, and the fact it takes enchantments. So instead of talking about Feed the Swarm, I'm going to move on to Balaged Recovery. And Balaged Recovery, more than any other double face card in this set, I really think lends itself to the get it into every deck it can, because it makes such a huge deal of difference in a deck. It's just having an extra Eternal Witness pretty much. It's a regrowth effect. But let me just say what the card is real quick. Balaged Recovery is 2 and a green for a sorcery, and it says return target card from your graveyard to your hand. And then the flip side of it is a land that enters the battlefield, taps for a green, Balaged Sanctuary. So again, this is the card that I'm getting as many. Every time I open a pack, I'm putting it to the side. If the price is, I'm probably going to buy a bunch of them because this is going in every green deck that has, that I can survive a tap land in it.
Exactly. And just for anybody new to the game, and all of us are new to these kinds of cards, these modal cards, the way it works is it's in your hand as a sorcery, Balaged Recovery, or it's also in your hand as a land, Balaged Sanctuary. So you choose how you play it. So if you play it as a land, it comes in tapped and it is a land on the battlefield. That's what it is. If you play it as a sorcery, it's a sorcery and it goes to the graveyard. Now, of course, if you can get it back and you can play it in any mode. So it's not like the adventure mechanic. It's a little bit different. It's modal, but like you said, it can slot into your 37 as a land, and then, if I'm flooded with mana, guess what? I need to use this to regrow something. So there I have it.
And I think the key thing about these cards, and I want to just say this to all the listeners out there, you can't be afraid to play it like a land. If you have it early on in your hand and you need that land, you need to stay on track with the rest of the table. That's going to matter a lot more than keeping up the sorcery side of it to have as an option. But, it's one of those things later in the game, the land part doesn't really matter, as well as the fact that, you can go back for it. Just don't be afraid to play it as a land. That's the key thing.
Yeah, especially if you need a land, play it as a land. Yeah, just count it as, because you're counting it as a land in your 99, right? So
Yeah.
exactly. Anyway, that's really awesome. I'm gonna go buy a few of those too. I think they're only at like 40 cents right now or something, 30
Yeah.
something, 40 cents. But yeah, like you can put that on almost every deck you have green in, which is like a lot of my commander decks.
There you go.
My sleeper, which I've seen people kind of chatting about it now, it's still, the price hasn't gone up on it. But the sleeper that I think is out there is Myriad Construct. It is 4 generic mana for an artifact creature construct. Excuse me. It's got kicker 3. So if Myriad Construct was kicked, it enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter for each non-basic land your opponents control. And then when Myriad Construct becomes the target of a spell, sacrifice it and create a number of 1/1 colorless construct artifact creature tokens equal to its power. And it's a 4/4. So the reason I think this is a sleeper, I know people are talking about it as like possible combo piece. I'm not a combo-y player, and I'm newer to the game, so I can't figure out how to make it a combo piece. But other than that, I was just looking as a straight card a few weeks ago as it got teased, and I'm like, for 4, and then you kick it for 3, you're paying 7. But you're in a game of Commander, you got 3 other people around you, and by turn 4, right, the earliest this can come out, I'm guessing there's going to be at least 5 to 7 non-basic lands. So many people play so many non-basic lands in Commander. So if there's 4 or 5 of those out there, right, this thing's dropping in with 4 or 5 counters on it. It's coming in as like a 9/9. You know what I mean? It's coming in as a 10/10 almost every time. So you're paying 7 for a 10/10. So I was looking at like that with just those stats. And then when it gets targeted, it just breaks up into a bunch of little artifacts. And if you're in an artifact deck where you can use those artifacts to tap them for mana or stuff like that, like this card is just, I think, really good. And it's not like one of those super powerhouse cards, but it's also a card that I think in any deck, especially decks that favor artifacts, it's gonna do work. It's a good card.
I think I like it best in a token deck. I think of it less as a big creature and more as something that at a whim either of your opponents of yourself can become a bunch of little creatures. So I think I like that better in a token deck personally.
Yeah, I just think it's a card that's still a little bit underrated. People will kind of figure out ways to play with this, and it'll just go up in value.
I mean, I'm getting vibes of God, what was it? Now I'm bringing up cards off the top of our heads versus having a little game plan. But it was from Magic Origins. But there's a card that has a similar effect that when it dies, it breaks apart into little ones. And that one was great. And it was nice, too, because you could pick X and be any amount. But this one definitely looks better and better in Commander than it does anywhere else because of all the opponents with all the non-basic lands. So I could definitely see this breaking apart into like 12 different versions and very easily.
Exactly. 12 little 1/1s, and then you can pump those out maybe, like you said, if you're like in a token or artifact type of, anyway, it's fun. Looks a lot of fun. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about maybe a commander. So before we get into our top 5, let's talk also maybe about a legendary creature we're excited about that didn't fit our top 5 but super awesome, really cool looking to
And, we're not talking about the commander for too long, but I know, especially at the top of this, I was the one who recommend doing this. And I was like, hey, Joel, I need to fit in more cards in this somehow. And I said, let's include a commander that we think is really cool. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about it. And for me, it's Charix, the Raging Isle, 2 blue and a blue for a legendary creature, Leviathan Crab. Spells your opponents cast that target Charix, the Raging Isle, costs 2 more to cast. And for 3, Charix gets +X/+X per turn where X the number of islands you control. It's a 0/17. This is a 4 mana 0/17. That's really hard to remove. It is really, really snazzy.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because you can give it's +X/-X until end of turn based on your island. So in those mono blue decks, especially if it's the commander, you could turn this into like a 16/1 and swing in with your commander.
Oh, you can't. For 3 mana, right? Like it's not. As long as you're playing mostly islands, or if it sees your commander, it's all islands. So I think it's gonna really. I mean, that's a cool card to build around. Not gonna lie.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Especially, I mean, you could do like there's a Leviathan crab, like
Yeah.
so many. Put a bunch of Leviathans and crabs in that deck too, as well, and get
Yeah.
those blue. Man, yeah, and there's another blue card we'll talk about later that would fit really cool in that deck too. Do some work, but man, yeah, Charix. I like the artwork on it too. The big old crab.
That's just a snazzy card. I had to find a way to talk about it. What's your
Exactly.
pick, Joel? What's your favorite commander here?
So this guy, I wanted to try and slip him into my top 5, but I just feel like as a commander, he can go into the 99. But as a commander, he is insane. He's going to fit in a lot of decks. But it's Ashaya, Soul of the Wild. It's 3 green for a legendary creature elemental. Ashaya, Soul of the Wild's power and toughness are each equal to the number of lands you control. And non-token creatures you control are forest lands in addition to their other types. So what's insane about this is, yeah, this is going to get slipped into landfall decks, into Omnath decks, into elemental decks, right? It's just a great, powerful card. Plus, it makes all your non-token creatures you control forest lands. That's insane. So all those other board wipes that say destroy all non-land permanents, they are not going to hit all your pieces because all your creatures are also lands. So it can't hit the non. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So this thing is protected in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah.
They're lands, so all those different effects are gonna happen, right? So if they're lands, do they come in? Don't they affect landfall too? Then
Yes.
when they hit
That's
so,
what I'm reading from this.
Yeah.
That
So when
they
they
are
hit,
lands entering the battlefield.
so your land hits, and then you play your land, you get your landfall trigger. You play your creature, you get your landfall trigger. I don't know. This thing just looks really fun, really exciting. And it kind of protects itself in a lot of ways, which is really cool because in green there's already a lot of other cool ways to protect yourself and protect your pieces on the board, I should say, giving them, indestructible and different things like that. But with the Shia out, you can really get some shenanigans on. And if it says forest lands, that's the question I was going to ask you. I didn't ask you before the show, though. You know those cards that say go search your library for a forest?
That will not work with this specifically because it's only it's stuff in play. It's things you control, which are the things in play. It wouldn't affect stuff in your graveyard. It's not going to affect stuff in your hand. Not going to affect stuff in your deck.
Yeah, that would have been cool. Anyway, can't add that onto it, but it's just really cool. I think Ashaya is really awesome. If I was thinking about doing a mono green deck, I would definitely be considering Ashaya.
Oh, that's
All right.
exciting. Okay,
Let's
on
get
to
in
our
our
top
top
five. Jinx.
Let's do it.
Okay. So my top 5 is an interesting top 5 choice. I don't know about you, Joel, but when I was, picking out my top 5, I really struggled with it. But this is a type of effect I love. It is very powerful, and this is going to go into every landfall deck or every go wide or big creature deck. Or it should just go wide deck, and it's just something that's not big creature. I'm sorry. Yeah, go wide deck, landfall, big mana. This is going to go a lot of places, and that card is a Scoot Swarm. For 2 and green, it's a creature insect with landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under control, create a 1/1 green insect creature token. And if you control 6 or more lands, which in our format's very easy to do, create a token that's a copy of Scoot Swarm instead. It's a 1/1. So this is a 1/1 that makes more 1/1s. And if you have 6 or more lands, it makes a 1/1 that makes more 1/1s. So all of a sudden, very, very fast, you have an army of these things. I mean, definitely bring the tokens with you. Bring the dice. It's going to be hard to track all these, but holy cow!
And if you can get it out early, right? Like we're going to be making, or in Commander. I mean, you what we typically go at least 8 to 12 turns in a game, right? On average,
Yeah.
I don't even know. I mean, you're going to be making a ton of these things because you make a Scoot Swarm in addition to a 1/1, who makes another Scoot Swarm in addition to a 1/1. Like this thing just multiplies.
And I'm seeing this too. The first time you play it, if versus players that aren't familiar with it, they're going to kind of let it go. You're going to win the game with it. Then after that, it becomes something that needs to be dealt with when it comes into play. And if they don't, it's not. It's one of those under the radar cards. Someone might let you get away with it, and it gets really crazy. Or it's one of those situations where, you have the 1/1 and they just can't they can't get deal with it. They can't get rid of it. The heck, they don't want to waste their removal on it.
Yep.
I mean, it's board wipe city. Get that board wipe protection too. I'll tell you.
Well, shove this thing in a Shia deck, and then every time a land and a creature enters the battlefield, it's going to do the same thing. Wait a minute, would that combo?
It's not, because it's a token. No, it's a token. It won't count. It's a token. I saw you exactly where you were going in your head. No, it doesn't. But the one thing I do want to talk about one thing with Scoot Sorcerer. Imagine the combos though, where you have your Scoot Square, it's getting a little ridiculous. Your opponents kind of let it go because they're thinking, oh, I can just do a board wipe or something, right? All of a sudden, you're like, what if I when they do that, all of a sudden I do make it indestructible until end of turn, right? Out of nowhere, then they just burn that border wipe, and you're still going off, right? There's a couple effects like that.
Drop a heroic intervention.
That's what I'm saying, heroic intervention or something that all of a sudden they're like, God, I can't. You held on to your lead and you just wouldn't let it go. It just seems scary to me.
Awesome. That's a great card. It's a great card. So my number 5. We're going from green. Let's go to red. Let's go to one of these flip cards we're talking about here, and it's Valakut Awakening. It's 2 and a red for an instant. You put any number of cards from your hand on the bottom of your library, then draw that many cards +1. And the flip side of it is it's Valakut Stoneforge, which enters the battlefield tapped. It taps for a red. So Valakut Awakening, you put any number of cards from your hand on the bottom of your library, then draw that many cards +1. So it's almost like a wheel. Like if you want to wheel your whole hand or just part of your hand, you can do that. And I just feel like this card is going to slot into every red deck because it is also a land, right? It slips into your 37. Like you don't have to, but you can slip into your 37 as a land, as a tap land, and then in red you're going to need land at the early game, right? But if you're a little bit later, you also have card draw. And like red is one of those things that doesn't always get direct card draw, right? It usually gets the kind of like that quick card draw, or that you can exile this and then you can play it later. But this is just straight up, a wheel tap of effect, pasted almost onto a land in a way at instant speed. So this is my number 5. I think it's really awesome. It's going to go in so many of my decks that run red. Valakut Awakening.
I'm about to say this hits every mark that red, especially mono red, needs. This is just a slam dunk for red. On to number 4. So I picked another green card for my number 4. I actually liked a lot of green cards in the set. But this one I think is an interesting one. I mostly picked this one because we're definitely going to see it for a long time afterwards, not just right now. And that card is Ancient Green Warden. It's 4 green for a creature elemental. Has reach. And you may play lands from your graveyard. That's the big key text there. But it also says, if a land entering the battlefield causes an ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. It's a 5/7. So this is like a fantastic card in landfall. Nice. This is going to go into every landfall deck, and it gives the landfall decks the ability to, when they get rid of a land, get it right back into play. I mean, this card is going to see some play from here on out.
Oh my god, yeah, this card is great. You got another way to play things out of your graveyard, but doubling up your landfall triggers, especially in landfall decks where they can play a few lands per turn. They're already set up for that. This thing's crazy. On a 5/7 reach creature, sometimes that reach really matters in green too.
Very much so.
All right, my number 4. I'm doing another red one. I don't know why I keep picking red. But
red in this set was very good.
A lot of good. And I'm not a red player. I play black mostly. But this card's really good. It's Leyline Tyrant. And I drew 2 of them in my box. I was happy about that. Leyline Tyrant. It's 2, a red and a red for a creature dragon with flying. You don't lose unspent red mana as steps and phases end. That text is insane. And then when Leyline Tyrant dies, you may pay any amount of red mana, and when you do, it deals that much damage to any target. It's a 4/4. So, this thing sits there, and how many times have you have extra mana that you didn't spend, right? Yeah. So you're not going to lose that. You're going to tap it to hold on to that, to float that mana. You're going to hold that mana up. And if you can hold enough of that up, 5, 10, and a lot of these red decks where you're burning people and you're multiplying, you're burning anyways, even if you only got 4 to 10 mana held up at any point, when he dies, you could just shoot somebody with 10 right in the face. You know what I mean? This could be this could definitely be a finisher in a lot of decks. Yeah, it's a great card. I mean, we love anything that says leyline on it. As soon as I seen the word leyline, I was like, wait, what's this card do?
I mean, it's a 4/4 flying dragon for 4/2. You know what I mean? The stats
all
are there
it
already.
is.
It does
But
all
you
this
don't
extra
lose
stuff.
you don't lose that mana, and that's crazy because that could really add up in some games. So, and you can use that for anything too. That's the other thing. Like, you don't have to use it to smack somebody in the face with it. But if you don't happen to, right, somebody just removes you or kills you, you can use it to slap them in the face. But if you don't want to, you can use this for anything. You can build it up for another spell. You know, it's really good.
On to number 3. So my number 3 is, you're going to see this in artifact decks. You're going to see this in Eldrazi decks. I'm going to put it in my Eldrazi deck. I got some game plans. This one is the Mono Rock to add to your Mono Rocks. Again, anything that's colorless cares. That card is Forsaken Monument. It's 5 colorless for a legendary artifact. Colorless creatures you control get +2/+2. Whenever you tap a permanent for a colorless mana, add an additional colorless mana to it. Whenever you cast a colorless spell, you gain 2 life. Cares about artifacts, cares about Eldrazi. If you're colorless anywhere, to any degree, this card is worth looking at.
It's a straight up doubler. It gives you +2/+2. It gives you additional mana. It gives you 2 life. Everything colorless. It loves this.
Yeah, exactly. And again, it's a little more niche, which I kind of like too. It makes it a little more fair, and it makes it so you're not going to see it all the time, but the decks that want it will surely want it.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely. If you're running Eldrazi, you put that Forsaken Monument. Oh yeah. All right. Well, my number 3 is a card that I don't know. This could be a little bit higher on my list personally, but number 3 I think fits just perfect. It's one of these flip lands at Mythic level though. It's Agadeem's Awakening. So for X, black, it's a sorcery. You return from your graveyard to the battlefield any number of target creature cards that each have a different converted mana cost, X or less. And on the flip side, it's Agadeem the Undercrypt. As a land, as Agadeem the Undercrypt enters the battlefield, you may pay 3 life. If you don't, it enters the battlefield tapped. And it taps for a black mana.
Yeah.
So this card's crazy because early game you don't have to drop it as a tap land. You can pay the 3 so that you can. In black we always pay life for things, right? Just to play it as a land. So I just slipped this into some of my black. I think I got one in a box, so I put it in one of my black decks. I replaced the swamp for it because I'm like, well, this just fits as a swamp. And then if I happen to get flooded with mana and I need to use this later in the game, I have a recursion spell from the graveyard to the battlefield.
I definitely think that this whole cycle of lands, look at it at the power level it is. It's extremely powerful. They definitely lean themselves more towards a mono-colored deck with the 3 mana cards, but especially Agadeem's Awakening can go almost to every black deck. And you can play it as a land. Yes, it costs 3 life, and if not, you just enter the battlefield tapped. It's not a big deal. And, again, just don't be afraid to play it that way, as I said earlier. But really the key takeaway here is the fact that this is something that is very, very flexible, and if your deck can survive, do the 3 black mana, it's worth putting in just for that flexibility.
Yeah, and these are the kinds of cards that we were talking about earlier that are really going to affect, I think, Commander for the long haul, because if you're building your decks in the way we do, we put about 37 lands in there, right? Yeah. I mean, this could get you thinking, like, should I put this in as a 38th spell? Should I put it in as the 37th, and only run 36 lands or the 35 lands? Can I get away with 2 or 3 of these? It's gonna affect the odds of what you draw too. So if you're drawing at the beginning and you got this, it's like, well, I got a land, I'm good, I don't have to mulligan again. But later in the game, it's like I have a higher chance of hitting a sorcery than a land, which is what I want later on in the game, right?
Yeah. And I want to point out, don't be afraid, especially for the Mythic cycle, to put it in as a land, because it can be a land. In fact, you should generally play it as a land. But later in the game, especially in Agadeem's Awakening case, it's a win condition. It's just something that you can use to win later on. So as long as you are flexible and really take advantage of its flexibility, again, any deck that can survive the triple mana cost, it should be in.
Awesome.
Okay, on to my number 2, and I'm cheating again. I haven't cheated for a little while, but I'm cheating again. I'm picking a bunch of cards at my number 2, and it is all the pathways. This is a fantastic land cycle. It's going to directly affect our format. In fact, there was a moment there which the price didn't reflect how powerful it is. Now it seems like people have figured it out, but this is just a go-to, land, multicolored land that, doesn't have a drawback. The biggest drawback is the fact that once it's out, you can't tap for one or the other color, but you can always, when it comes in, pick the color you need the most in the moment, and go from there. So very, very, very minor drawback for a big, big gain.
Yeah, and what's crazy about these pathways, like you said, like I think there's more gain. I don't think there's even much, like for me, there's not much drawback because I replaced like a basic. I think I got which pathway did I put in that deck? I put River Glide pathway. It's the blue and the red one, right?
Oh yeah.
And then the back side is the Lava Glide pathway. So in my blue red deck, I just put it in a place where I would put a mountain because guess what? It always is a mountain. It doesn't come in tapped. But if I happen to need an island, I have the River Glide side, right? So it's insane.
Yeah. No,
because
I definitely
you replace your.
I was gonna say it's a straight upgrade compared to a land, without a doubt, or to a basic land, whether or not entirely, but 98% of the time. But compared to other duels, the downside is very, very minor.
Yeah, it's really good, and man, this is really gonna change a bunch of my deck. Those are gonna get expensive. I have a feeling.
Well, yeah, I should have jumped on more. When I looked 2 weeks ago after they got spoiled, a couple of them were like at $2-3, and I was like, man, people haven't figured this out. I was gonna open my box, see what I got, and go from there. I wish I would have been a little more greedy and just said, screw it, let me get a few, and then been really, enjoying that decision now.
Yeah, now they're all closer to about $5 or so, right?
They're getting close to 10, most of them.
Oh, crazy. Well, anyway, hopefully you got some pathways in your box like I did. They're good cards. Yeah, to stay on budget, it's still a good choice to go grab a few of those if you can. I don't feel like they're gonna get any cheaper.
There you go.
All right, well. That is cheating again with your number 2, but man, those pathways are really, really good. They got to be up there. Number 2 for me is a Planeswalker. I haven't put a Planeswalker up as my number in my top 5 for a while, but I just not since Oko, right? That was my number 1. But this Planeswalker, I really have a lot of hope for, and I think she is maybe a bit overlooked. But I think Nissa of Shadowed Boughs. For 2 black and a green is an insane Planeswalker. She's a legendary Planeswalker, Nissa. Of course, Nissa's awesome. Comes in with 4 loyalty. She's got landfall on her, and I think that's what makes her crazy. So with landfall, whenever land enters the battlefield under your control, you put a loyalty counter on Nissa of Shadowed Boughs. For +1, you can untap target land you control and have it become a 3/3 elemental creature with haste and menace until end of turn, and it's still a land. But what I really like about her is her -5. You may put a creature card with converted mana cost less than or equal to the number of lands you control onto the battlefield from your hand or graveyard with 2 +1/+1 counters on it. So she's got landfall, and in a lot of these landfall decks, you're dropping multiple lands per turn. You play Nissa for 4 mana, right? You drop 2 lands. She goes up to loyalty 5, loyalty 6. You literally can -5 her right then and there on that turn. And then when you do, you're literally taking something out of your graveyard, you're taking something less than or equal to the number of lands you control onto the battlefield. It just goes straight on the battlefield. I think Nissa she's really powerful, especially in landfall decks. But even in decks that aren't necessarily strictly landfall decks, if you can get it in a lot of green or black decks where you want to play, especially green decks where you want to play multiple lands, you just play a few multiple lands and you can -5 her right away. She's really powerful. I like her a lot.
I'm definitely seeing Nissa as part of some big plays in our format. Expect the pictures to come in. Expect these stories to happen about what your Nissa did in the middle of combat. A fantastic picture.
Yeah, I think if you set her up just right, where you just have just the ability to play a few lands on a turn, she's gonna do damage because you're dropping her for 4 mana. Then you play a few lands, but now you're cheating something out, right? And it's a lot of value all on one play. So
Yeah, I don't even think the floor on her is very low either. I think it's a win-win all the way around. Anything that cares about landfall in the slightest or recursion, it wants a Nissa if they can make it work.
always love Nissa.
Well, on to number one.
Wait, drum roll. Always a drum roll. Alex is number one. This
I will
awesome.
never do the drum roll, Joel, because I'm not the audio engineer here, and I feel
will
mean
eventually
when
add
I do
a drum roll and a drum roll effect rather than banging on the table.
I feel like I get all the glares from all the audio engineers. If I were to add a drum roll, I get so scared about it.
The perfect amount of cheese, and I love it.
People who aren't audio engineers won't entirely know, but when you deal with it, oh boy. So, anyways, my number one.
I know all about it. I got a lot of drum roll effects.
I'm sure I accidentally moved my chair around. I get a little antsy sitting here. But anyways.
Yeah, I got my QLab all ready to go. I'm going to put it, I'm not going to do it.
Okay, so my number one, a very, very exciting card. I know a lot of people have been talking about it, and for good reason. I really could not have included this anything. It had to be on the list, and number one makes the most sense to me. And that card is Morag, Fury of Akum, 4 red and a red for a legendary creature, Minotaur Warrior. It says each creature you control gets +1/+0 for each time it has attacked this turn. And then has landfall whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control. If it's your main phase, there's an additional combat phase after this phase, and at the beginning of combat, untap all creatures you control. It's a 6/6. This is landfall, more combat steps, and that is ridiculous.
More combat steps on a 6/6 creature that also gives everything +1/+0 for each time it's attacked. So every time you do a combat,
It gets bigger and bigger.
It gets bigger.
This going into landfall decks. This is going into Minotaur decks. This is going into warrior decks. This is going into combat step decks or combat decks. This is going into every deck that has even the slightest want for it. This is a fantastic card.
Yeah, it's really great. Anytime you can have multiple combats, right? But usually you pay a little bit of mana to get those multiple combats. This is just every time a land falls, you're getting that. So that's like 1 mana you're paying almost, but you're not even tapping it. I mean, it's crazy.
It's nonsense.
It's nonsense. Yeah, you're not allowed to stick this in your dinosaur deck though, Alex, because it's not a dinosaur.
I'm not. It's not a dinosaur, and I'm pretty good about that.
I know you're pretty strict on making sure your tribal decks stay tribal, so...
Yeah.
No. I got a Minotaur inside my dino deck.
I have really considered adding a Not of This World as a free counter spell or a protection spell for my commander in my dinosaur deck, and I haven't done it specifically because it's flavored for Eldrazi and not for dinosaurs, so I've been flirting with it, but I haven't done it yet.
Yeah, that is a temptation right there, especially with that deck. Yeah, man, Morag, Fury of Akum. This thing's insane.
It is insane.
It's insane. Anytime you get multiple combat steps, it is insane. All right. Well, my number one. Here we go. There's my drum roll. He's not as big a creature, but this little guy can do a lot of work, I think, and I love this card. It is Thieving Skydiver. For 1 and a blue, it's a creature Merfolk Rogue. It's got kicker X, so X can't be 0, so you may pay an additional X as you cast this spell. It's got flying, and when Thieving Skydiver enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, you gain control of target artifact with converted mana cost X or less. If that artifact is an equipment, attach it to Thieving Skydiver, and he's a 2/1. I think as soon as this card was teased, I texted the group, and I texted everybody. I said, I'm stealing all your soul rings. This thing is so much fun. It's just, I mean, it's a Merfolk Rogue. It's going to go in that Rogue deck that I pick up this weekend. But this card just, to be able to, on turn 2 or 3, I guess, because you have to pay 3 mana, 2 and kick it once, you can steal somebody's soul ring on turn 3, and you've basically played this card for almost 1. It's a 2/1 flyer. Or you can go in and maybe later in the game, somebody's got a Lithoform Engine for 4. You kick this thing for 4, 5, 6. So you pay 6 mana total. You drop this thing out as a flying 2/1. You steal their Lithoform Engine. I mean, Thieving Skydiver is going to do work no matter what. There's always powerful artifacts in Commander. I think at such a cheap cost, in the ability to just snack something from somebody, maybe you just need to steal somebody's Swiftfoot boots, right? Pay one in a blue and pay 2 as the kicker. Boom, snag their Swiftfoot boots if you need it for your commander. I mean, Thieving Skydiver is going to do a lot of work in a lot of decks that run blue. So that is why I put him at my number 1.
And I definitely think, too, the more competitive your group is, the better this card gets. Once you're sealing swords consistently, Moxes even, we talked about, stuff of that power level. This just really starts, being a value engine that gets ridiculously out of hand. In the lower end, it's going to be a lot more fair, which is exactly what you want in a card, having the casual players, it's just a good, solid card in your deck. And then for the really competitive players, it scales up and really starts to become a powerhouse.
Yeah, because it's the kind of card that, you can play it in so many blue decks, and it's going to push you ahead of another player, right? Because you're taking their rock or you're taking their powerful artifact, but at the same time, that's pushing you a little forward because you're pulling them a little bit back. So I just think it's really good. Like you said, in the more competitive circles is definitely going to be played in those control-A decks is very, very powerful. But also, just in casual play, I think it's a lot of fun. Just come in and steal something, push somebody back a little bit.
Well, awesome. That was each of our top 5s for a top 10 list. We still haven't quite figured that out. But
it's each of our top 5.
It's each of our top 5. It makes sense.
5 plus 5 equals 10. Yeah, we're good. We figured it out.
It's a question of what we title it.
We did the math. I think I usually say top 10, even though then when we get into it, each of our top 5,
Well, there you go. But that's it, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed it. And if you're interested in picking up any of these cards, please use our affiliate link. We're a very, very small channel, and everything at this point really helps us out, helps us keep going, motivates us. So if you're thinking about buying a cards, we'd appreciate it if you'd use the affiliate link.
Yes, and thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe. Come back for more. We love to do a bunch of deck techs, under 100 deck techs, especially also these set reviews. And we're gonna start releasing some newer episodes having to do that are shorter, just little tidbits here and there, a bunch of stuff that we're excited about in the near future. So stick around, please subscribe. Tell your friends that are new players about our channel too, because we're especially geared towards trying to have awesome content for newer players in the format. So there you go. Thanks for listening.
See you.